Greetings. Welcome to another episode of Fighting the Void. Today, I, Ginger, am here again with Jeff Dornik. As promised, it got messed up. He was supposed to be here on Saturday, but due to my own inability to properly do things on the internet, I was camping on Saturday instead of Friday. So Jeff was gracious enough to allow us to reschedule. So we are here in the middle of the week. Call it a bonus episode if you would like, because we were here on Sunday, and I'll be back on Saturday per the usual, and it's going to be great. You see, when I mess up, you get more. So that's, I think that's good. So Jeff is here to talk about the latest book that he's getting put out, which is Church and State, How the Left Used the Church to Conquer America. And it features a host of authors, one of which I am fairly familiar with, Denise McAllister, who those of you who have been paying attention to the Twitterverse for a while now, especially in matters political, will recognize her as being someone who got canceled from the Daily Wire and the Federalist because she had a bit of a dust up with, oh goodness, I can't remember. It was it Yashar Ali or was it someone
something like
else?
That? Yeah.
And that was interesting, the whole saga, but she has definitely bounced back. Regular appearances on the Steve Day Show, now with a new show that is launching on your network, Jeff. So, Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I always look forward to our conversation, and had you on my show for the first time not too long ago, so that was a lot of fun. So,
which was fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, so it's always fun to do these things. So, and again, like it was funny. Like I said, I think on either last time I was on here, when you came on my show, I was like, It's kind of weird sometimes to kind of flip the script because I'm always the host. And so it's nice to always, come on as the guest and I'm not the one controlling the conversation.
Yeah, I actually felt the same way. I was like, this is, it's different. It's nice to be the guy who answers the questions every now and again. So
exactly.
But since it's my turn to ask you questions today. So Church and State, How the Left Used the Church to Conquer America. This seems like it follows very well with the previous book that you put out with Social Injustice, which was very much about how, again, the SJW world has largely infiltrated and corrupted much. Christianity as a whole. This applies to the evangelical world as much as it applies to the Catholic world, unfortunately, as actions of many of our bishops would unfortunately illustrate. First of all, I guess I would ask, what prompted the second book so closely on the heels of Social Injustice?
I think Social Injustice really took the approach of really looking at it, I think, from like more of a theological perspective, I think, when it came to social justice. And so with that, the main focus was how the social justice warriors were compromising the gospel, and specifically those within Christianity. And so, while we dealt with a lot of their issues and stuff, the main focus was like a theological, this is where they are directly contradicting what scripture says. And then, we capped it off with a great chapter on legitimately how they are compromising the gospel by redefining sin, changing the focus of the need for a savior, what's God saving us from, that sort of thing. This book is kind of, like you were saying, kind of maybe we'll call it a sequel, a continuation, something like that.
Part two. Let's call it part two.
Well, yeah, we'll go with part two. I feel like what's happened is there's the social justice warriors. It was a very specific set of people. What we're looking at today is we're looking at this strategy to actually destroy America, especially leading up to this next election. And what's been interesting is seeing how, as the left is infiltrating into Christianity and into religion and into the church, we're seeing the result of that is the crumbling of our society. And I think that if we don't fix the church, there's going to be nothing pushing back against these leftist Marxist people that are literally trying to destroy our country. So basically the premise of this is more looking at the strategy, how they're going about it, what they're actually doing, and then actually looking at how is this resulting in the destruction of our entire country.
Okay, so you've got a number of different authors tackling this. I assume they're each kind of how is it a particular way it's organized? Does each author kind of have their own look at the strategy, looking at a specific aspect of the leftist strategy, or how did you go about putting this together and selecting the different essays and everything to make the book?
Yeah, of course. So basically, what I did is I proposed the idea to each one of the authors, and then I basically kind of took their ideas, like in what way do you see the left attacking the church, under the premise of they're trying to destroy the church in order to conquer the country, essentially. And so, somebody like Denise McAllister, she took it from the approach of dealing with sexual identity and how that redefinition is now playing out into what we're seeing happening in society today. We have somebody like Greg Locke took the approach of what was happening during COVID-19 and shutting down the churches. We're still going through that out here in California. Indoor churches not allowed. On top of that, Bible studies illegal in the state of California. That's insane.
Bible studies,
like specifically Bible studies. That's not going against our constitutional rights at all.
No, not at all. Especially when, of course, the protests and everything are allowed, and in fact, are even essential.
Yeah, exactly. And so it specifically within that very same law, it's specified still being legal. But basically, what we got a great group of guys, and they each were taking a different aspect of how the left is undermining the church and essentially rendering it voiceless, like not able to actually have a voice when it comes to these cultural issues because we're all compromised now. And so we're literally seeing where the visible leadership within evangelical world, we're literally seeing them being completely, they're undermined, compromised, and not able to actually combat what we're seeing happening in society. Like the church has not had a good voice in responding to Black Lives Matter. The church has not had a good voice in responding to abortion, responding to Joe Biden, responding to the Democrats. That's really what we're trying to take a look at.
Yeah, and there's a lot right there, isn't there? There is a ton right there. And I completely agree. The fact that the leaders, again, in both the Catholic and the Protestant worlds, have really, really missed it, well, frankly, for a long time. But right now, this was like a moment to sort of rise up and really, okay, show us what you're made of, guys. We need you now more than ever. And we've mostly gotten either radio silence or meek compliance with the requirements of the state. And that goes for my diocese, and it goes for, frankly, around the country and in many places around the world. And it's distressing. It's got, I mean, put it this way, as the Catholic, I'm like, okay, it's time for the laity to stop waiting on the leaders. Time to stop waiting for the hierarchy to actually to lead. We need to remind them that that's their job. We need to remind, that doesn't mean I have to stand up and lead in their place, but I perhaps have to lead in showing them, reminding them that that's their job, that they have to do that. To pick an example, Catherine of Siena writing to the Pope when he was in France, saying that get your butt back to Rome. That's where you belong. And to help to settle this thing, it's going to take that sort of thing. And that's all around, because as you said, you've got your leaders too that have dropped the ball, and it's time for everyone who calls themselves a Christian to stand up and remind their leaders how to lead, and that if that's your calling, then by golly, get started fulfilling that calling. Plain and simple.
No, it's absolutely. And I think it's time. And I think that this, like you were kind of saying, this is a wake up call that we are all actually, as Christians, we are supposed to be participating in ministry. And I think for too often, like in the evangelical world, this is a really huge problem. Is people show up, they're the audience, they're watching the pastor up on stage do ministry. When you actually look at scripture is actually saying the pastor is there supposed to be equipping you to go out and do ministry. And we have this weird backwards kind of mentality. And I'm really hoping that this can kind of be that wake up call for people to be like, maybe we need to stop waiting on our pastors to do everything for us. And we just go out and do it. When we look at the Bible, we look and see God always used regular, ordinary, everyday people. Who did Jesus pick as his disciples? Some fishermen, blue-collar workers, people that weren't educated, the cast offs. Yeah.
He was across the spectrum. Everyone from tax collectors to a couple of guys that were educated to lowly fishermen. Yeah, you're absolutely to people that were part of radical resistance movements to the Roman Empire. It was across the spectrum. Yeah. And we need to we need to remember that a lot. And see, what you just described in the evangelical world, Jeff, is something that again, in Catholic world, we've kind of been struggling with sort of arguably since before, especially Vatican II. Vatican II called for a lot more lay participation in ministries and everything. Well, the way that's been put into practice, unfortunately, was not the intent. The way it's been put into practice is you've got a lot more lay people participating in the Mass. It's like that wasn't the intent. The intent was to actually, no, you need to go and be taking what you're getting there in the Mass and bringing that out into the world. That's the job. We always talk about the church needs to meet people where they're at. And that's not really the priest or the pastor's job necessarily to go out and meet people where they're at. His job is to lead the flock. Whereas it's the congregation. It's our job. It's our job to go out there and meet people where they're at, and then kind of bring them over to the sheep corral there.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is I think part of the problem is that evangelism has turned into invite your friend to church. Yeah, so that way the pastor can do the gospel presentation. Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like what the problem is that the pastors aren't equipping the flock to go out and preach the gospel themselves. Yep. And I think part of it is that, and I talk about this actually in my chapter in the book, which I really deal with the celebrity mindset and celebrity worship of pastors and how the left is actually using that in order to have influence and power and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Yep. But one of the things that I was writing about is that I think that there's this industry that's happening within Christianity, and there's a certain level of status, there's power, there's money involved. Like a lot of these big name pastors, like that the majority of people look up to, they've got these teaching ministries bringing in $5, $10, $20, $50 million a year. That's a lot. That's a lot of money coming in. But also, in order for you to bring in that kind of money, you have to let everybody know that you are vital to the church in order for people to be motivated to give you that much money. And it's this backwards kind of thinking where I don't remember Paul establishing a teaching ministry, marketing himself to go out and send out fundraising letter in order for him to bring in multi-millions of dollars. I don't remember that strategy in scripture.
No, if anything, Paul de-emphasized himself. And it was when he did write soliciting funds, it was, okay, I need you guys to help these guys over here. And he was very specific in his letters. These guys, they're poor. They're screwed up, man. They need your help. You got some spare stuff. You should I'll carry it over there and drop it off. And yeah, otherwise he largely de-emphasized his own personal self, because it was always, for Paul, it was always, it's not me, it's not my teachings, it's Christ, plain and simple.
Right. Which also that example, and a lot of people don't actually take a look at this, but it was interesting as I was looking at kind of looking at socialism in the Bible. Everybody always points to the Jerusalem church, right? And they were sharing with each other and all that kind of stuff. You do realize that at a certain point, the church in Jerusalem ran out of money, because Paul later on in his later epistles had to raise money for the poor people in the Jerusalem church. Yeah. That's evidence kind of right there, isn't it? Socialism doesn't work. Yeah. Yeah. That is something that always got me about the, sell all your belongings and give it to the poor crowd, which again, if a person individually wants to do that, fantastic. Great. That's awesome. I think that's, if that's what you're supposed to do, go do it. Props all the way. However, suggesting that everyone should do that, at some point,
at some point, everything's been sold and been given to the poor. And at which point, that's what that usually means. We all wind up poor.
There's a reason why the communist countries are third world countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a reason. They run out of money. They run out of resources. It's just the reality of it.
Yeah. Yeah. They run out of resources except for the very small handful of people at the top. I mean, we talk about the 1% here in this country. I'm like, give me a break. In the communist countries, it's like 0.00001% of people that actually have the vast majority of the wealth. It's whoever the dictator is and his family and whoever their favorite cronies are. That's it.
Yep. Which is what we see in most progressive states here in the United States. I mean, look at New York, look at California, look at Washington. I mean, like out here in California, it's like, and I always describe it as a third world country out here. And the reason is because there's no middle class. They've all left. And then there's you're either rich or you're poor. Like you could be in Beverly Hills, you could drive 2 blocks down the road and you see the worst poverty that you wouldn't even think is in the United States of America. It's insane. But it's all right there. And a lot of it is because it's the progressive socialist policies that they're implementing. And for whatever reason, they're getting these results. And then they're turning around saying, we can fix the problem. It's like, no, you caused the problem. Maybe the thing is, let's let everybody get rid of regulations, get rid of taxes, and maybe that would fix it.
Yeah. If you just give me more power and more of your money, I'll be able to fix the problem. If only we can do more. If only we can do more of what got us into this mess, we'll be just fine. Now, to get back to the to the book itself. Now, what is it that gets laid out as the strategy of the left to sort of use the church to conquer America?
Yeah, so basically what they're doing is they're coming in, and a lot of it comes with funds, both from outside interests. You know, there's always the stereotypical, oh, it's George Soros dumping money anywhere and everywhere. Well, it's true. Right. So we're not going to discount that, you know. But then the other side of it is that there is influence of money coming in from the government for a lot of these programs, and I know that this is also prominent within the Catholic Church as well. Especially when you're dealing with immigrants, you're dealing with illegal immigration, with placing people, with dealing with people from like the Middle East coming over. So there's that aspect of it. There's also dealing with training, redefining sexual orientation. Again, coming directly from the government and influencing our theology. Like this is pretty crazy when you have the government coming in and essentially funding the church to redefine our biblical theology. Yeah, to me, there's a problem there. And so what we're seeing is that we're seeing a lot of our visible leadership switching over, some gradually, some shockingly quick, and becoming more and more progressive. The more you hear them talk, the more they sound like Bernie Sanders or AOC. It's literally they're parroting their talking points. And what's going to end up happening is if the church is no longer going to stand up and preach the biblical truth, the church is no longer going to be a voice against what we're seeing happening in the mainstream and Black Lives Matter and the leftist progressive Democrat platform, you're literally going to see the destruction of our country because the church is not taking a stand for biblical truth. And so that's really the big overarching theme of the book.
So basically the strategy is to basically woo us with funds, buy silence, and kind of force compliance, which has been happening for a long time. And with the passage of different legislation, you mentioned redefinitions concerning sexuality and whatnot. That's been going on for a very long time. Mitt Romney famously shut down Catholic adoption agencies in Massachusetts when they wouldn't go along with, letting same-sex couples adopt. They're just like, nope, we're not doing that. That's kind of against our religion a little bit. You might know that
just a little bit.
It's against yours too, by the way, Mitt. Anyway. That aside, he rather famously said, well, I guess you're just going to have to shut down then. And it's been going on elsewhere as well. And there's been numerous attempts. Actually, before we go any further, there's an old joke in Catholic world that the first bishop to ever accept a government grant, Judas.
That's very true.
Yeah, it's like I heard that. I was like, yes, I like it. I like it a lot. Which I think is, I don't know. I think one of the solutions, insofar as it's a solution, at the very least, it's a way to stop the bleeding, is to stop accepting the government money. I know. Now, I guess here's a question, because I know of at least one parish that has a school and is going with an old school classical education and is accepting zero government money for any of it. And it, trust me, my parents go there. My brother goes there. We go there from time to time, and it's a completely different feel than you get in a lot of other places. So I guess I would say, can you think of any other places that actually are doing that actually are at least taking some sort of minimal steps that to push back?
Yeah, well, like I've got a friend of mine, Pastor Ken Peters. He's actually writing a chapter in the book, but he's the founder of the Church of Planned Parenthood. But his church and organization.
Wait a minute, repeat that a second. What the Church of what now?
the church at Planned Parenthood. So they are famous because they will go and they will have church services once a month out in front of their local Planned Parenthood.
No kidding.
And
all right,
yeah, and so they say that they fight their battles through worship. And so they'll show up, and I think, and I think it's definitely a better way of protesting, because there's no yelling, no screaming, no attacking or whatever it is. You're literally there praying and singing songs. And currently, right now, Ken Peters and 4 other pastors in Spokane are getting sued by Planned Parenthood for causing traumatic. What was I forget what the exact terminology was, but basically they were traumatizing the patients at Planned Parenthood, even though they're holding their services after hours and they're singing songs. I mean, it's getting pretty crazy. So
that tells me that it's working.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if Planned Parenthood is suing you, I think something's working right.
Yeah,
but I know he's a pastor. His church, he has a couple churches up in Spokane, and they also have a private Christian school. I believe, if I remember correctly, in one of my conversations with him, they don't take any government funding. And he's actually planting a new church called Patriot Church. If you can't tell, he loves America. But he's all about freedom, liberty. Just let us go about our day, do what we want, and stick it to the government a little bit. It's like, hey, get out of my life a little bit. It's the way the Constitution set up.
Yeah, which of course, and I'm sure we've discussed this before, but it's people forget that the whole separation of church and state thing, it's meant primarily to protect the church from the state, not the other way around.
Yes. Well, and also our Constitution is there to restrict government.
Yeah.
Not necessarily restricting us. Like that's the thing, is it's like when it talks about freedom of religion, for whatever reason, I don't know how they've done it, but the left has been able to turn that into restrict everyday people, not restrict the government. It's almost like they flipped it on its head, and it's the complete opposite of everything that the founding fathers taught us. And you're just sitting here like, how in the world do you get the Supreme Court to even go along with this garbage? It's insanity.
Well, it's the old long march to the institutions, and they're bad. You got to give them credit. They're masters at manipulating language. They are masters at playing with people's emotions. They are masters at playing the long game.
Yeah, and they've been playing this game for decades and decades. And the thing is that, and also like dealing with how they've been infiltrating into the church, they've already done this within the media, within entertainment, within politics, within the education system. They've already hijacked all of those influential systems. And I think that religion and the church is that last attack that they have to make. And I think if they can conquer religion, now they control every single aspect of influence over the American people, and I don't see how you overcome that.
Yeah, frankly, yes. And as soon, who knows? Because they tried it in the French Revolution, although they were a little bit more ham-fisted in their attempt when they when they took over the cathedral at Notre Dame, and instead of the mass, they got a prostitute to be up there as a physical representation of the goddess of wisdom and said, worship her. It was a little ham-fisted. They seem to be a little bit more nuanced in their approach now. And yeah, you're right. It's instead of trying to, at least with the infiltration tactics, they're not trying to just straight up get rid of Christianity. They're trying to co-opt it.
Yes. And they've been very strategic about how they've done it as well, because what they'll do is they'll blend their leftist anti-God philosophy and they'll blend it with biblical theology, and it's where it's this subtle change. It's like they'll use Bible verses and then they combine it with this crazy ideology, and then they make it seem like it's okay. Like they'll literally say, like dealing with reparations. It's like, you're supposed to take care of the downtrodden. It's like, but I don't think that's what the passage means. Or take care of the sojourner means that we have to accept all illegal immigrants into our country and care for them and give them free healthcare and free money and free housing and all this kind of stuff. You're like, I don't think that's what the passage means. But it's these subtle changes where if the everyday person who's not educated, if they hear the explanation, they're like, oh, I didn't realize that was in the Bible, but that makes sense. And that's the danger in all of this, is it's so subtle, but it's this blending of Bible and communist Marxist ideology that is really leading people astray right now.
Yeah, and I think Marx even suggested co-opting Christianity by using exactly those sorts of means. Basically play on the heartstrings, play on concern for the poor and everything. And that's how you kind of get Christians on your side. And it's really, really frustrating, especially, again, in Catholic world, when Catholics start to identify as socialists, because it's the one economic system that has actually been officially condemned.
Really?
By the church. Yeah. Pope Leo XIII, Rerum Novarum, back in the, I forget exactly when. I think it was probably the late 19th century. Or maybe I want to say late 19th century, or maybe it was early 20th. I can't remember for sure. But yeah, very explicitly condemns socialism. It's like straight up, flat out says, no, this is bad. This is literally anathema. Thou shalt not. And I mean, that's why John Paul II came down so hard on liberation theology, because it was socialism and it had already been condemned. And what are you guys doing? Excuse me a minute. Sorry, attack of COVID. Anyway, we're all getting
if you went into the hospital, they would diagnose you as COVID-19.
Probably, because I just had a cough.
Yep.
And
that is
and that as an aside, I'm willing to actually at this point, less paranoia and stupidity is a COVID symptom, but that's another conversation.
Yeah. So, but I think, like one of the things that like we're seeing today is just how the everyday American is so accepting now of socialism. And then on top of that, you're seeing the everyday Christian is becoming accepting of socialism to the point now where I'm like, where are the capitalists? It's all of a sudden like the people that love freedom and liberty, they're no more. I remember growing up in the church and everybody loved America. Everybody was very patriotic. And, maybe part of it too was when I was younger, going through like junior high and high school was just shortly after 9/11 and all that kind of stuff. Everybody, it seemed like everybody loved our country. Yeah. And all of a sudden now we're like, you literally have pastors saying, don't love your country. If you love your country, that means that you love your country more than God, and you're sinning and you need to knock it off. You are not allowed to be patriotic. You need to be patriotic for heaven, not America. And I'm just sitting here and I'm like, this is seriously coming out of the pulpits in the church. It's literally insane, and I don't know how they get away with it.
Well, I would say, why not both? If one is forced to choose between America and your church, obviously you choose your church. However, that doesn't mean you abandon the country. That doesn't mean you hate the country that actually gives you, or at least thus far, has allowed the freedom for us to worship as we so choose, which is a great thing, a wonderful innovation in human history. Pretty much the only place where that's actually still seriously done on a real level. When in Europe they kind of let you do whatever you want, sort of.
Yeah. Well, I believe if I remember looking at this right, mm-hmm. America is the only nation in the world with true freedom of speech mm-hmm. and true freedom of religion.
Yeah, that's like it's actually enshrined in the law. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's places, and everybody always cites, certain countries. And a lot of times I'll go look at those countries and their laws, and it's like, but they still ban hate speech. They still ban certain theologies. Like you're free to practice Christianity, but there's still restrictions. Like we're the only country that is supposed to have these things blanket free no matter what, and that's the beauty of America.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are definitely restrictions elsewhere in Europe. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know what all of them are, but I know they are definitely there. And to pick England, there are, if you're a Catholic in the royal family, there's certain things you cannot hold because there's still laws on the books from the English Reformation that haven't gone away. And conversely, in Lebanon, as far as I know, it's still the case where there are various individual religious groups that have to be represented to a certain degree. Like Maronite Catholics, for example, they have a seat, and I'm sure various other groups have X amount of seats. It's essentially a quota. It's an affirmative action quota in essence, and it's interesting. This is pretty much the only place on earth where none of that is really taken into consideration. It's like, show me what you got.
Yeah. But what's shocking to me is that you have these pastors mm-hmm. that should know better. Like these guys, like the majority of these guys that are pushing this ideology, they've been pastors for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We're talking about just like the new, young up and comers that are the problem. The problem is you've got guys like Al Mohler and Tim Keller and Russ Moore and some of these guys that like they've all been around the block for as long as I've been alive.
Okay.
And they're literally the ones that are over here pushing this ideology and saying like essentially don't pledge allegiance to the country. Like don't stop being so patriotic. Like it's okay that socialism happens. We need to push for reparations for African Americans. It's these guys that are pushing this ideology, and literally if we go down this route, it's going to destroy our country. But what's interesting is those same guys will condemn the conservatives for being too politically active. But then they will turn around and preach from the pulpits all this leftist Bernie Sanders ideology.
Isn't that the way it always is, though, Jeff? That people on the left always take people on the right for mixing their politics and their religion. But usually, while the people on the left are visibly mixing their politics and their religion.
Yep.
Very open, very upfront, usually doing it from a freaking pulpit.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be honest, they're not 100% separable. You can't. You can't completely separate your politics and your religion. It's just, if you do, you're overly compartmentalizing your religion, to be perfectly honest.
Oh yeah, well, and the problem too is what we're seeing is within the evangelical world. It used to be that if you were considered evangelical, you were a conservative voting bloc because everybody pretty much agreed on that kind of stuff.
Default.
Right?
Yeah.
No longer the case. And one of the big problems is that a lot of the mainstream guys that are part of organizations like the Gospel Coalition, even the Southern Baptist Convention, all that kind of stuff, they're pushing these leftist talking points, promoting Black Lives Matter. Essentially making it okay to vote for Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or AOC or all these, crazy leftists. Literally, there's a pastor, I can never pronounce his last name, but literally he said in the 2016 election, I'm willing to sacrifice the fact that Hillary Clinton supports abortion in order to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't get elected. So he was willing to get Hillary Clinton elected, even though Trump was running on more of a pro-life platform because he was so anti-Trump. This is indicative of what's going on in the church. But one of the other sides is you have the more conservative, evangelical side that follows along with like the John MacArthur's and people like that are extremely, into pietism. And they interpret Romans 13 as saying, submit to the government in all things, no matter what, unless they blatantly tell you to sin. And don't get involved in politics because government can't save you. And just you should only focus on preaching the gospel and just let God take care of the rest. And and so what we saw with like even John MacArthur's church, for example, when President Trump came out and told churches, was it a couple months ago, maybe a month ago, like open back up, I've got your back. If you guys hold services and the state comes after you, we'll prosecute, right? Mm-hmm. So that Friday, so this was Friday, John MacArthur comes out with a statement. We're gonna submit to our pastor because we've been submitting to Gavin Newsom for all these months and not holding church. But we're gonna submit to President Trump and we're gonna have church on Sunday. So we'll see you all there. And then a lower court in California overruled Trump and said not allowed to do that. So then Saturday morning, a statement comes out. I'm sorry, but even though President Trump is the top official in the land, but this court overruled him, we are going to submit to the court, and so we're not going to hold services again. Like, this is the kind of crazy mentality that's going on in this hands off. I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to rock the boat, and I'm not going to get involved in politics. We're just going to submit to whichever governmental leader throws something at us.
No, 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 do not do that. No one should be doing that. I mean, for crying out loud, at the very least, man, we've got to be willing to stand up against the government when they are essentially forcing us to choose between, are we supposed to, like Peter said when the call before the freaking Sanhedrin in Acts. He's like, well, are we going to listen to God or are we listen to men? Which one do you think, huh?
Yeah.
You start preaching this Jesus stuff. No.
But see, the problem is that the argument that's coming out of this crowd is they're coming and they're saying, well, that was an instance where Peter was being commanded not to preach the gospel, so that's a sin, right? So he's being forcibly told to sin, so he shouldn't submit. In this instance, they'll say like Hebrews 10:25, if I'm referencing it right off the top of my head, where it says that you shouldn't stop. Basically, you need to gather together for church. They're like, well, that wasn't an actual command. That was more of like a suggestion. And so when the government's coming in and saying don't hold church, they're looking out for your best interest. So you need to submit. And so the thing is that I look at Jesus' ministry, right? Mm-hmm. He goes up against the Pharisees and the scribes, the local governmental leaders who had these commands. They weren't blanketly forcibly telling him to sin with their commands, but it was wrong of them to do, like, taking to the extreme, don't work on Sunday and things like that. And Jesus was like, I'm not going to submit. Disciples, go out there and pick the grain and eat and heal on the Sabbath and all this kind of stuff. Right. That was going against the government. That wasn't just going against religious leaders. That was going against the government. And a lot of people forget that the Pharisees and the scribes were governmental leaders. They were the government. Jesus was rebelling. So if we're going to have that interpretation, you're saying that Jesus sinned.
Yeah. Well, and if I can borrow a talking point from Steve Dace, he points out when addressing exactly this attitude, it's okay. Well, if Paul meant we should always submit to the government all the time, unless they're blatantly telling us to sin, then why did he get martyred? Why did he? Why did they come after him so hard? Why did he have to die in service of the gospel? Why exactly? In fact, why did literally all of the apostles, save John, get martyred? Pray tell. Explain this to me. Now, I suppose the counter argument, based on what you said, would be, well, they were trying to get them to stop preaching and everything, and that would be the sin. What do you think they're doing to you? What do you think they're doing to you by shutting down your churches, by shutting down your Bible studies, by saying you can't sing loudly in church? I'm sorry. I've got a song for you, Gavin Newsom, and it's probably one I shouldn't sing in church. But that's beside the point. What do you think is happening here? I was looking at another blog, and obviously a lot of people are like, this is starting to feel a little end-timey, and somebody pointed out, kind of in support of that, this is the first. We just lived through the first time in history where there were virtually no public masses or, frankly, public acts of worship anywhere on the planet for weeks. Certainly within the Western world.
Yep.
South of the equator, I think, different story. Thank goodness. But I don't care who you are, what you believe. That is ominous right there. And if you don't think that if you let them shut down your churches, they're not going to come for you elsewhere, you're wrong. You are so wrong. Go read a book, for crying out loud, about the Soviet Union, about what's going on in China now. Yeah, I know. Right now, they've got the largest growing segment of Christianity, certainly north of the equator, if not on the planet, which is a great and wonderful thing. But it's not because the government wants it to happen. You're still risking your life by doing it at all.
Yep.
Where do you draw the line? Where does one draw the line? If they let you have your Zoom meetings, is that okay? If they take away everything else but Zoom meetings, is that all right? What if they outlaw?
What I want to know though is, do these pastors think that the underground church in China is sinning by not submitting to the Chinese government?
Right, because they're not necessarily all actively out there preaching the gospel. They're just gathering in worship. So
they could gather on Zoom.
Yeah.
Like what? Like why do they have to gather
China,
together?
They probably couldn't, but that's beside the point.
Probably not. Yeah.
There's probably firewalls or various things that would result in having the stormtroopers come barging down your door and severing your internet connection.
Yeah. Well, now have I told? And I don't remember because I've been on the show a few times. Have I told you my theory on eschatology throughout history?
I don't believe so. No. I don't think we've ever gotten into eschatology. So go for it.
Okay. So when you look at the Bible and then you also look at even more recent history, I believe that every single major basically big government thing that took over much of the world, whether it was Great Britain, Nazi Germany, going back to the Babylonian Empire, the Greeks, the Egyptians, whoever it was. I believe that was always an attempt by Satan to establish his one world government, right? So they always got close. They always got close. Great Britain ruled practically the entire world at one point. They were close. They almost accomplished it, right? Yep. And then I think every single time we always saw those empires implode, right? And it was God saying, "It's not time yet. Implode, Satan, start over." Try again, and then he would move on to another country, and that sort of thing. So you can get into a little bit of conspiratorial as well as you would a lot of these like in the Bible you would see the Magi, and they would be along with each of those big empires. You saw it with the Egyptians, with the Babylonians, and then there's also the theory that who the Magi were when they came to Jesus, when he was young, right? That they were the kingmakers. So they came because they saw him as going to be that one world king. And that was God actually saying, I'm going to use this evil, essentially using Satan in order to show, no, this is the one true king kind of thing. So that's an interesting theory, right? But we go through history. Yeah. All these nations, we see it happen over and over and over again. They get close and then they implode. They get close and then they implode. And then I think that this is the first time where Satan's like, I gotta try something different. So instead of trying to conquer everybody, he's trying to change it from within. And because we see this happening across the entire world. And I think that leading up to 2016, I think that was that moment of, okay, so are we going to go full on globalism and essentially establish that one world government, or is God saying it's not time yet? I think the combination of Trump getting elected and Brexit happening, really that I think at that point that was God saying, okay, it's not time yet. And I think we're kind of in those fighting pains of Satan and the left holding on, trying to actually make this happen. That's why you're seeing this go crazy everywhere. You're seeing.
So your idea is the last ditch temper tantrum.
This is a last-ditch temper tantrum. Now, again, I'm not saying this. We're still in the danger territory of they can still pull this off. If like, and I've made the point from a secular standpoint. If Joe Biden wins this election, that's the end of America, because they're going to legalize illegal immigrants. That's going to be an entire voting block for the Democrats. They're going to legalize voting rights for felons. And then they're also going to make Washington, D.C. a state, which will get them 2 more senators and some more representatives. There's no coming back from that.
No.
Yeah. So there's literally no more coming back from that. So that's why this election is so important. But I think looking at this eschatology wise, we're literally seeing this is that last battle of, okay, is this time, or is this God saying you tried again, but this is going to be your implosion and go try something else? It could go either way.
I think that's an interesting idea, and just following the trajectory, just thinking back kind of on the trajectory of history a little bit, maybe we've got one more cycle of this, assuming assuming your overall theory is right. We've got one more cycle of this, because nothing that threatened global domination has come out of South America yet.
It's true.
And you could argue that nothing's really come out of Africa either. So essentially, you could argue it. Yeah, it's sketchy there, just because many global empires have at least gone through Northern Africa. So maybe we've got one more good cycle of this before it really is the end times. But I hope so, because I've never wanted to live through them. Because I know the see, Protestants get way more into eschatology than Catholics do, way more. it's like it's y'all's thing, man. And I've never been able to buy the whole like all the Christians are going to get taken up to heaven and then it's going to suck.
Yeah,
like,
we'll see.
No. I'm pretty sure we're gonna live through the suck.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is because and again, I'm kind of an outlier when it comes to Protestant theology. Like a lot of times, I kind of push the bubble a little bit. But when it comes to like eschatology, like most people believe that what's going to happen is you're going to have the rapture happen first,
right,
and then you're going to have the 7 years of tribulation, right?
Right.
Whereas I more take the approach that. Because I think in my opinion, the Bible's clear that we're not going to go through the worst of it, but I think we're still going to go through some of it. And I think that the rapture, if I'm reading this right, it's actually going to happen at the halfway point, at the 3.5 year mark, mid-tribber, right? But what's interesting to me is that I feel like I kind of go both ways. I used to be pre-trib. Now I can kind of go, it could be mid, it could be pre, but I'd rather prepare for the worst and then be pleasantly surprised than expect the best. And then, it's, oh crap, I got 3.5 years. But I think it's also, I think that pre-trib theology is actually the most dangerous out of them all, because those are the ones that if I'm right and the rapture is going to happen at the halfway point, there's going to be all the pre-tribbers that are like, this isn't the Antichrist because we're still here. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, and that's really where we see a lot of people being led astray.
Oh yeah, and you could see a lot. I could definitely see a lot of people losing, basically losing faith, losing motivation to continue and everything, as say it continues to suck more, and they're like, well, but why am I here? I'm supposed to be gone by now, man. I'm pretty sure I heard trumpets sounding, that I just saw a red horseman scampering across the field, and Jesus, you're late. I could definitely see that happening with a lot of people. I mean, I fully expect whatever it is that happens, however it goes down. If I'm around for it, expect it's probably gonna go through every last bit until Jesus is like, all right, that's about enough of that. Time to put an end to it.
Yep.
But we'll see. I don't know. I don't know exactly how it's gonna go down. I'm not gonna pretend to. And I think when it comes to that, I think something we both agree on is, you know what? Have yourself right. Worry about having yourself right for whenever it is your time is, and however the world's going to end, well, God will take care of that.
Yeah, but also the interesting thing to me as well is with all these church leaders that are pushing socialism and essentially globalism is really what they're pushing for. A lot of times they're talking about open borders, they're talking about all these different aspects. It's very strange, and you start getting into this, and you're just like, I think that they think that they are trying to establish God's kingdom on earth. They're trying to kind of create this utopia of we need to get this set up so that way Jesus can come back and all this kind of stuff. But then when you actually look at eschatology, like maybe you think you're doing it for Christ, but I think you're actually doing it for Satan. Like the result of your work will usher in the Antichrist. So maybe you guys shouldn't be going down this road.
Right. Well, and it's like they're trying to push it, trying to push it through one particular mode. They're pushing it through politics more than anything else. Whereas politics / economics, a little more politics. Whereas you should be pushing it actually with the gospel, the whole gospel, not just your cherry-picked verses and cherry-picked misinterpreted verses about welcoming the sojourner and whatnot. You're not going to solve all of those problems and everything in this world. If we're going to proof text, let's do it. And remember that Jesus said the poor you will always have with you. So it is so interesting. It's almost like I wouldn't say this about any one in particular. One, because I'm not familiar with them. Two, I don't want to get into judging any one particular person's motivations anyway. But one could be forgiven for thinking that some of them, at least, have actually given up on doing it with the gospel. Have given up on doing it through ministry, through evangelization, through reaching out to people on a small basis. And said, well, it's time to use the levers of the state. And in part because the state loves to use the levers of the church to get what they want. So they think it's a mutual symbiotic relationship and not realizing that it's like, no, this beast will eat you. This beast is already eating you.
Yeah. Well, also too, we gotta remember as well, like when you start getting enough power and fame and money and things like that, it messes with your mind. And I think a lot of times too, what we see with a lot of these prominent, big name pastors and things like that, they're separated from the everyday people. It's like if you're a normal person, you're here, but if you're one of these pastors, you're way up here. There's this separation between the two groups of people.
Oh, there is.
So they're not going through life with the everyday people to actually understand what's really going on. And I think that when you become separated from it and people just become numbers and statistics and ideologies and things like that, it's easy to kind of go down this route of, but hey, what's wrong with open borders? Because if you have open borders, you're dealing with human trafficking, you're dealing with drugs, you're dealing with illegal activity from the cartels, you're dealing with women getting raped as they're coming across the border. I mean, if you were actually sympathetic to me, you'd want to shut that down. Yeah,
one would think so. Not to mention, if you were genuinely interested in protecting people, genuinely interested in, frankly, the gospel, you wouldn't be doing anything that would promote letting this stuff run rampant. I mean, for one, it's not like they're crossing the borders and running right into your church doors anyway, pal.
Yeah,
it's not what's happening at all.
But the other side of it is, I feel like what we're seeing today in America, it's very reminiscent of Genesis, like Noah's time, where like everybody was doing what was right in their own eyes. Yeah, and I feel like the pastors are allowing that to happen. They're not taking a moral stand on anything. They're just like, go about your day, be a Black Lives Matter person, go riot, loot, whatever it is, and you're just like, I mean, there was something bad that happened in Noah's time. Do we want? I know we're not going to have a flood again, but do we want punishment like that again? I don't think so.
I don't. I'm not looking forward to that sort of thing at all. Right. Call me a wimp if you want, but it doesn't sound like a good time. Okay, yeah. His will be done and all that, but I'd really rather not. Yeah.
Well, and all
except for crying out loud, even Jesus said, "Is like, is there another way out of this? Can we do? Is there a different way? Because it'd be great if there was. No. All right.
That's a good point. And I think that when we're looking at what's happening today, and we're seeing the way that I think we're seeing that Christians oftentimes are sitting back, and they're obviously we talked about this earlier, seeing the big name pastors and stuff. They're the ones that are doing all the ministry and doing all the fighting and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, but again, when you look at Scripture, or even look at history, right?
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther, he was a priest, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he did start a big Reformation by taking a stand and essentially created an entire new splintered off version of Christianity from the Catholic Church. He was it's not like he was like the Pope and he took a stand. Like he was just a priest. Like there was a difference. And I think that God uses different people at different times and different scenarios. And oftentimes he doesn't use the most famous or the smartest or the most educated or whatever it is. And I think that that's something that we need to remember as everyday people. It's like, maybe God could use me. I don't know, but it's my job just to be obedient. Yeah.
And obviously we're going to have different take on Luther and the Reformation in general, but
I had to throw that in there. So,
and that's fine. And I will say, what he did took guts. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. The dude had a big, giant, shiny brass pair, and it is something that we could use all that spirit right there. We could use a lot more of it these days. And as far as that goes, I'll definitely give him all the props in the world for being willing to say, it's like, hey, this is what I believe. Let's go.
Yeah.
And we could. I completely agree. We could use a little bit more of that spirit these days. We're gonna need it in the days to come, one way or another. No matter how this goes down, we're in the thick of it right. Well, we're almost in the thick of it right now. We're heading down right into the middle of it. And if we don't have a little bit of that, of again the courage of a Martin Luther, or the courage of, on my end of things, the St. Thomas More, who refused to tell King Henry, yeah, sure, you can go ahead and divorce your wife and get married to someone else, no problem. And he lost his head for it. And that was just for not saying yes.
Right.
He didn't even flat out say no. all he did was stay quiet.
Yeah.
If we don't have some of that basic spirit, or some of the spirit of Peter, who was willing to say, no, we listen to God, not you.
Or even our founding fathers. Like,
they
literally said, no king but King Jesus. I mean, like, seriously. Yeah. Like, we should be having that mentality. I'm not saying we need to have another Revolutionary War, but at the same time, like, we're kind of getting to that point.
We need that spirit. We need the spirit of 1776 back in us. No matter how it is this winds up going down, it's going to take courage to make it through it. It's not,
absolutely.
We're not going to get through this by keeping our heads down. We're not going to get through it by just hoping it goes away, going about our daily lives. If things don't, and frankly, doing that, being nice, being polite, going with the flow, keeping our heads down, is exactly how we got to this point. Exactly how we got to this point.
Absolutely.
Another contributing factor is the fact that we spent far too much time. I'm going to leave that point aside as a whole different conversation, because the bigger thing is the fact that we've been too unwilling to take a stand. And we could, again, the various reasons for that, a whole nother reason, it's a whole nother episode, probably several, to get into all the different variables of why we slid into niceness, slid into apathy, and slid into, I'm just going to go about and keep my head down and hope they leave me alone. It's like, no. We, at the very least, we need to demand to be left alone these days. Being left alone takes courage.
Right. But I think one of the things that we have to remember is that when you stand down, and then essentially, because for most people today on the conservative side, a lot of times it's because they don't want to be called racist, they don't want to be called bigoted, they don't want to be called names, and so they just stay out of it. It's like you avoid the confrontation. But what you're actually doing is you're giving them the power. So why would you give somebody else power over you to control your thoughts, how you act? Why would you allow them to do that? If you just didn't care, they have no power. But they control you because you give them power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And anyway, we're about at an hour here, Jeff. So the book is Church and State: How the Left is Using the Church to Take Over America. And it's got, what's the actual publisher and everything, Jeff? Or is this through your own label?
It's through my own label, through Gatekeepers. And yep. So this is our second book that we're publishing. We've got another one on pre-order as well. But you can go to gatekeepersonline.com/church and state, and it's got all the information on this book specifically. If you want to check out any of our other resources, you can go to gatekeepersonline.com/store. We've got I think 5 books in our bookstore right now. And if you use the code Jeff at checkout when you pre-order the book, you'll actually get a free ebook of Why I'm Pro-Life by Pastor Sam Jones. So a nice little perk for your listeners.
Well, there you go, guys. Go check it out. Go check out Gatekeepers. Go check out what Jeff is doing. He's doing a lot of good stuff out there. And thanks, Jeff, for coming back on. It's always a fun conversation. You never know exactly where it's going to go, but it's always going to be a good time.
It's always fun.
It is. And on that note, everybody, I'll be back this Saturday discussing the whole concept of microcultures and how it's a possible way to combat some of what's going on here, and hopefully to put things back together after they fall apart. And on that note, be good. Check out Jeff's network and that new book that's coming out. And go ahead and keep fighting the good fight.